Hello and welcome to the Construction Revolution podcast. I'm Purya Gats, the CEO and co-founder of Giatec Scientific, where we are transforming the concrete industry through smart technology. On this show, we explore the trends, technologies, and innovators that are reshaping the construction landscape and driving real change. Today, I'm joined by Liza Sandman, the CEO and co-founder of Pathways AI, for a discussion on the intersection of sustainability, technology, and innovation in concrete and construction. Liza brings a unique perspective on how environmental product declaration (EPDs) can be more than just a compliance tool. Her team is building technology to help producers and contractors take real action on decarbonization by unlocking insights from their material data. Join us as we talk about the future of sustainability in construction, the challenge of operationalizing carbon transparency, and how companies like Pathway and Geotech are working to accelerate change across the industry. Good morning, Lazy Sandman. Yeah, very happy that having you part of this Construction Revolution podcast today, and hope we can have a very productive conversation, right? And learning from your experience, especially from your background EPD, and how basically you and your firm going to basically bring impact to construction industry.
Thank you so much, Pura. Excited to be here, and it's always great to spend time together.
Absolutely, likewise, right? So yeah, that's quite my pleasure having this conversation today with you. And yeah, without further ado, let's kick this off, right? So maybe I can start with asking you a question regarding your inspiration, right? So how you started Pathway AI, the organization, and what was the kind of inspiration you had, and also describe the core value you bring to the construction industry and concrete industry as a whole. Yeah, that would be perhaps nice, a little bit understanding, yeah, your firm background and also how you started this company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me give a quick intro for anyone listening in on what we do at Pathways. So, in the simplest possible term, today we help manufacturers generate product level sustainability. So, most typically, that's environmental product declarations, but it's also a lot of other outputs that are needed to both understand the impact of the products and communicate that in sales and marketing. We work across a whole set of manufacturing sectors, but of course, for the conversation today, really most interesting to talk about concrete and the derivatives we have. I mean, cement, aggregates, and a bunch of other inputs into the concrete space. In terms of core values and why me and Alex, my co-founder, were so passionate about starting Pathways, really had a few different legs. The first one was that today, generating and understanding the emission footprint of your mix in concrete is just really time consuming and quite consulting heavy. The typical method is that you hire a firm that sends you a big Excel and they say, please fill out this Excel with all of your data from last year. And then you are left, whether you be a one site facility or manage a GM for like 20 sites, to figure all this out yourself. Right? The typical quotes I heard was, well, I am managing 30 different concrete sites and I had to sit on Google Maps and calculate transport distances, right? And this felt like a really obvious technology challenge to us, something that we knew we could automate and do much easier. The second part was that sustainability is exciting when it's integrated into the workflow of production, of improvements of reliability, of kind of customer service. And often it became a bit of like a stick to hit manufacturers or concrete producers in the head with you're not doing enough, when actually what it is a helpful tool to understand and improve your own production. So that's a bit of a value and a philosophy we think we bring to the concrete industry.
Yeah. Now, this is definitely the first point you mentioned is a pain we are hearing very often from our customer, right? Ready mix producer, right? Generating EPD. Old traditional way or old fashioned way has been very tedious and also, yeah, like not user friendly, right? So there are lots of complaints we are hearing, a kind of confirming your basically observation, which is very valid, basically, based on our basically visibility to the industry. Okay, so yeah, that was a good start. And then with that, maybe I just want to learn a little bit from your point of view. What is your take on how progressive procurement policies or processes are impacting our daily decision making of the ready mix producer, right? How do you see that these two are kind of related to each other? And if you can a little bit elaborate on that side, I think that would be very beneficial for our audience to understand the impact of the procurement policy as well as processes of the procurement even, right? So yeah, how that impacts basically
Yeah, let me give a
ready
few
mix.
different examples, and then really curious because I know Pura that's certainly also one of the places where people often will turn to someone like Giatec to
Yeah,
solve these
yeah,
solve some of these problems and challenges. So we see our customers get hit by a whole host of different requirements coming from their customers.
yeah,
Um, that is sometimes driven by procurement policies. That could be, everything from a city that has included now new development needs to have scope 3 and embodied carbon. That then trickles down to the real estate developer, trickles down to the general contractor, and then that requirement hits the concrete producer. Right, in New York City, that's things around public projects.
yeah,
So anyone, almost out of the blue, at least in the experience of some of our customers, they were suddenly asked, well, hey, if you don't have an environmental product declaration, you can't even bid on this project.
yeah.
Right, that
Very
con- that and that what often happens here is that comes quite out of the blue, and that's because there's a whole host of different procurement policies that are potentially ending up in a requirement of an EPD. It can be buy clean policies at a state level. It can be city requirements in terms of procurements and permitting,
yeah.
or it can be larger companies having their own internal
Own internal
policies.
policy.
So we see a host of our customers get requirements from the likes of Amazon and Google about the data centers, right? Both
Mhm.
across concrete and steel. Recently, we published the fastest ever EPD in North America in Florida.
Uh-huh.
This is a
That's
customer who's
cool.
not impacted by any type of traditional policy, but because one of their customers demanded it.
That's cool. Yeah, no, no, that's uh, very important, right? So considering all those three, four basically level of kind of policies that can impact ready-mix producers kind of serving the industry. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. Maybe another question, right? So since you touch on the EPDs, right? So and also a little bit focusing of this conversation around EPD or sustainability as a whole. EPDs are becoming more as a baseline, right? So generally, there's a requirement, right? We see more often, right, in regions or in different country, globally, even even locally in Canada, right? So this is more becoming a kind of a standard, right? So to ask for EPD, how are producer approaching this shift, right? I'm just curious to understand from your lens, what do we need to uh, do to make it a little bit more seamless part of their process, and what kind of uh, reaction or right so you see or shift from the previous perspective to that kind of demand, right, become more standard, and how basically they're shifting their approach to address these new things or new requirement, right, per se. Yeah, just curious to understand a little bit from your view, right, so how the producers are reacting to that kind of new norm.
Yeah. So I'm sure for anyone listening to this podcast, if they are a producer, they might sit in completely varying
Yeah,
realities. Right, we are seeing cities that border each other, where in one city it's completely the baseline and norm, and it is unthinkable to push out a mix without an EPD. And then we're seeing in a neighboring city that EPDs is much more of like a unique selling point, or you use it as a sales advantage, even though your competitors don't have it.
hmm
Um, what we are seeing consistently though is that as this is moving into being much more of a baseline assumption, and maybe for anyone less familiar with environmental product declarations, what does it mean when we say a baseline assumption? Well, it means that your customer understands the exact emission footprint of the mix you've had, or by using something like Giatec, you can combine your underlying EPD data and actually optimize based on sustainability. And that's something that requires it to be much more embedded in the workflow
yeah,
compared to what it has been traditionally.
yeah,
And I think that's a lot of what we're thinking about at Pathways. So we're just in launched a new feature for our ready mix customers, where it's possible to just upload your mix document, and we all have seen mixed documents, right? Long
Yeah.
PDFs with all kinds of information
Okay. Okay.
onto our site, and it automatically populates using AI. What would the emission footprint be of this mix? That might be relevant if
Cool.
you're a smaller producer
Yeah.
who doesn't have all of this standardized and integrated into a system. But then there's also kind of a different play, which is how do you integrate this into quoting tools and into your sales process or your QC process, through whether it be a command, a stone mont, like wherever this
Yeah.
information might live for you
That's
as a
very
producer.
interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. Speaking of workflow, right? So yeah, this we just touch on workflow. In your world, right? So what would be a perhaps ideal EPD workflow, right? If you're gonna basically, if you have a no barriers, right? No limitation, right? So to your to your basic division, what would be a basic a good EPD or ideal workflow, right? Seamless, we call it seamless workflow for EPD generation. Yeah,
Yeah.
can you maybe walk us through, right? So what would be basically that, maybe with an example,
Yeah.
would the workflow look like, whether it's a integration with maybe a smart mix, a Giatec, or right pathway AI tools that you have or solution you have, right? If there's no limitation, let's say that there is no change management, limit barrier, just what would be ideal world, right? So here from that point of view,
Yeah,
curious.
I love that question. We spend a lot of time thinking what is the ideal, and then what are the shortcuts that can get us to that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Maybe let me start with kind of two different pieces first. So, what is an environmental product declaration? It really includes, you know, a few pieces of data. What is your input materials?
Hmm.
So, who did you buy your cement from?
Yeah.
And where did it come from? Right? Did it come out of Turkey, or did it come out of a plant closer
Yeah.
located to you? That drives, of course, transport. And then what's your actual plant intensity? So are you linked up to the local electricity grid,
Yeah.
or do you use fuel or gas in your kind of
Yeah.
production process? And then, of course, where in some ways I think of kind of pathways and geotech being perfect complements is mix
Mix it.
optimization.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what Pathways is really good at is scenarios around your supplier or your plant operations.
Yeah.
But where I think of something like Smart Mix, it's all around how do you optimize the
Yeah,
mix.
and also ingredient of the mix, right? So yeah, and yeah, proportionally how basically, yeah,
Absolutely, it's kind of like one play is like which are the suppliers of the different
yeah,
ingredients, and the other one is how do you actually mix
yeah,
that
how,
ingredient.
yeah, the quantity of each gradient so that you can basically aggregate them to into the one mix, EPD per mix. Yeah, no, no, yeah,
Exactly.
okay,
That
that would
also
be
means that
ideal.
for an environmental product declaration, there are in some ways two steps. There is getting your plant set up in the first place, and then there is the ongoing use of integrating it into your mix software and making sure you're constantly pushing and updating it. When we think about setting up a plant, let me take the example of Southwest Concrete in Florida. This is a plant where we don't necessarily have some kind of big data integrations with the systems they're
Yeah.
using. But what we've enabled through our technology on the pathway side is really to say, well, just upload exports of, whether it be your utility bills, your waste information. Often it's just exports from your procurement system,
Yeah.
and then we can actually build all of the setup in terms of an EPD. Why is that an ideal workflow? Because for a one plant or two plant or five plant producer, it means they really don't have to spend more than maybe an hour
Hmm.
finding all this data and uploading it. For bigger customers, and here there's an interesting example with Heidelberg, where we're rolling out across a bunch of their ready mix concrete plants. We're building an integration with a player like Command Alcon. The philosophy there is, if this is all about data, go to the systems where the data already lives.
Yeah.
So instead of the own plant having to go in and log in and export and upload to Pathways, we at
Mhm.
Pathways are building integrations with these main systems
Yeah.
so that we can get it from there. And
Yeah.
in my ideal world, you then don't really have to do any work as a producer. It's mostly about giving allowances to sharing data.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. But just curious, just adding to that, right? So how do you see the role of verifier or those organization that needs to be externally validate or verify, or maybe a better terminology? Yeah, I cannot remember. Maybe it's a better terminology. You can correct me. Yeah. Well, what would be the role of those? Are they going to add significant values, or in the ideal world, you rather just to have kind of like a trust system, right? So self-claim, and if anybody wants to basically ask for kind of audit the system or ask for external information, right? So that kind of, because they're even on the certification and hardware, right?
Mhm.
Coming from the hardware background company, right? There are two systems, right? So CE, for example, in Europe, you can claim it, but if somebody question you or asks you for documentation backup, you need to have all the test data basically to show them, right, this is the right claim. Do you see the ideal world that approach is better, or kind of, I think current approach, at least in North America, I understand it needs to be validated, the third party verifier. How do you see in the ideal world, right? The system should be, right? Is EPD as a kind of stamp, right?
Yeah.
It's leave it to people to just claim and defend it if there is an issue, or go through kind of the processes of approval, making sure that everything is published, is kind of valid, and
Yeah.
well audited in
Yeah.
advance, right? Yeah, I don't know whether I
Yeah.
explained
No,
it okay.
you've explained it perfectly.
Yeah.
So, I personally and we at Pathways are huge believers in third-party verification.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that how verification works today is perfect by any means, right?
Yeah.
What it often includes is create a enormous matrix, and then what we've found sometimes, at least, and this also depends from verifier to verifier, is that the corrections you get are more like you spelled something wrong
Wrong. Okay.
rather than actually
Actually.
driving into the underlying assumptions or
Yeah.
how it was built. But that's something we also work with program operators, which are kind of the overseers of the
Yeah.
verifiers,
Yeah.
on to make more efficient. So the advantage of that system is that you continuously have the trust
In the system.
in the environmental product
Yeah.
declaration. I like to make this parallel
Yeah.
that an EPD is like the environmental nutrition
Yeah.
label, but instead of calories and carbohydrates, it's
Yeah.
chemicals and carbon,
Yeah.
right? And if you couldn't trust when you turn around the number of calories, like the value of that would fall really quickly.
Yes.
So that's certainly kind of the systems we're pushing towards. We're trying to automate a lot of this in Pathways. So you could even imagine saying a trained AI agent on top of all this data that a verifier can ask questions, say, where did this come from? And then it
Hmm.
pulls up the answer.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Instead of, I mean, it must also just be very boring to be a verifier.
Yeah.
Going
It
through
is.
someone else's Excel model and a big matrix. I mean, these are people who are passionate about sustainability. I don't imagine it's kind of that fun.
Fun job for them.
Exactly. So we think of how
Using
do we use
Excel to
technology
crunch the
more.
numbers. Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that there is a great place for AI, right? So to fill that gap and kind of audit automatically, and
Yeah,
also maybe a random check, a spot check, right? Different kind of auditing
yeah,
system. I mean, I'm borrowing that auditing things from finance for, right? So that yeah, the human beings involvement would be less and make it
yeah,
faster, easier, go through that validation, and still trust the trusts, or not compromising on the trust, right? It's still
yeah,
reliable EPD that everybody can trust. So, and then that helps actually even on the adoption of the
yeah.
EPD, right? Using more of it, right? Or see more uh, EPD
For
basically usages.
one question to you, because you obviously also sit at the intersection of this, is we know sustainability is never the only priority,
Yeah,
right? Our customers are producers, they're incredibly busy. A lot of what we do is we make it just easier for them. We
yeah.
save them time and cost, and that really is the value. But I guess from your perspective, how are you seeing the trade-off of sustainability and other priorities, especially in Canada, but also wider North America?
Yeah. No, actually, that's a very good question. As a matter of fact, I had a similar question to you, but let me give you my my view, and then I'll turn it around to you. But yeah, honestly, yeah, it's what we learn in North America at least, right? So especially this fast forwarding, fast basically pacing environment or fast pacing world, right? Especially with AI tools or advancement, we see that people are less patient, right? So, or less, yeah, they want everything to be eventually automated, right? But yeah, so that they don't need to put extra FTE or extra hours, extra billable hours, right? So yeah, this world, especially with the new generation, even, right, it's going to be worse, right? Expectation going to be very, very higher. So anything that going to be perhaps on the sustainability side or green or even innovation, to be honest, it's user experience, right, or user friendliness, right, or make it not extra burden, right, or extra click even. Make it significantly important. Maybe it's becoming significantly important, even more important, right? These days, people don't want to drive, right? So if I just want to just take a car and just self-driving car, right? Those kind of mentality, we see that more often even coming to concrete industry. And from our side, anything, right? So they are okay. I mean, with the cost, right? So additional technology cost. But what they are perhaps more hesitant is more human cost or human effort, right? So human effort translate to cost, and nowadays, cost of human, at least in North America, is significant part of the operational cost, right? So the FTE human, and for that reason, anything that we think of from innovation or sustainability point of view, you need to think it or build it actually through a technology lens to make it really minimum human touch, right? So, and that would be a significant, basically, barrier or maybe a catalyst, or right, it depends on how you look at it, for adoption, right, to go over the kind of change management, all those things. Otherwise, like, going to be very costly and also difficult to go to expect people learning new tools, like do the change management, get used to it. So yeah, from our point of view, something that perhaps is very, very user friendly or with minimum human interaction would be the future. The next 5 years, definitely, that would be the expectation of the market. So, and maybe with that, I'll turn it over, right? So, yeah, what is your view on the sustainability and cost, right? So, how we can get to the basically world that in sustainability, especially, right? Sustainability is not going to be at extra cost, right? Like the bottom line is still going to be the same bottom line, so that they see something that is not going to be at their own the cost, right? Or there is a ROI or return on the investment. Is there any solution, right? So especially in the area you're working, I'm curious, EPD, that make it, yeah, to bring them some saving or basically kind of extra revenue differentiation, anything that they can benefit so that they don't see it as an extra cost, right? But yeah, it's just the break-even cost. That what we learn, right, is acceptable. That's a good thing with this industry. But extra cost justification, without knowing that how what would be ROI, return for on the commercial side, right? Yeah, just curious to see what is your view on that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, completely agree with your analysis, and that's a lot of what you just said before in terms of the
Yeah,
importance, and that's exactly how we build pathways, which is
yeah,
um, it basically requires
yeah,
you go from spending maybe somewhere between 20 and 40 hours and something that can drag out over 4 to 6 months
yeah,
to being down to
yeah,
1 2 weeks with 1 hour of effort, and that time saving being probably the biggest differentiator in terms of our customers. I mean, the reality is we're in a incredibly I mean, concrete specifically is slim margins, high
yeah,
competition.
it is.
Anyone who's in this space knows that,
Yeah,
which means you justify all of your investments,
absolutely.
um, and that in some ways is kind of a premise for this. Um, we're seeing a few different ways that we are helping our customers use this to actually like the producers use this to communicate with our customers. The first is once you're set up on something like Pathways, you can generate a new EPD for every single mix you do,
Mhm.
which means you're able to actually integrate this into your sales workflow, even on projects where you might not have been asked for this
Oh,
information.
that's very cool.
And that's enabling our customers to use this much more actively as a unique selling point. Or have conversations about comparisons in terms of different different mixes, and that way show that they can be a thought partner to a GC or a developer who might be thinking about this. Again, because it's such a competitive market, it doesn't have to be that sustainability is even, top three concerns for the GC. It could be that it's number five. But being able to provide this information in a thoughtful
Yeah,
and very easy way
easy way.
is becoming very valuable. Um, the second part, of course, is the very practical one, which is what's the cost of losing a project because you don't have this information, right? That's most likely going to be more than
So
a
for
couple of $1,000s, which normally is what the price is of setting up a platform like Pathways on a plant. So even as we think about the kind of that risk of losing business is often where you know maybe more conservative producers who've been holding back are starting to make that investment, because even if you just lose one project, that's something that impacts your business significantly.
Absolutely, yeah. So in a way, you can translate it to loss of opportunities, right? So yeah, if they don't adopt PPD, right, I think the biggest value proposition here, loss of opportunity, right? So that they cannot win project, they're gonna have more lost project, and they're not gonna be competitive enough, right? So in the more yeah,
Completely.
fast evolving market. Okay, that's what's interesting kind of summary, right? So yeah, that's cool marketing tag. Great, awesome. Maybe just I'll shift the gear a little bit toward the understanding a little bit better, right? So yeah, on the technology side, right? Tech side, right? I know that the backbone of your solution is AI and technology, like a software solution, right? Or digital. And just curious to see, based on your observation, what kind of gaps you've been seeing or exist, to your opinion, right, at the moment in on the tech stack of this industry, right? You briefly touch on that, right? But I just want to, if possible, you expand on that, right? So what kind of
Mm.
gap you're seeing in the tech stack of ready mix producers, right? Operation, or yeah, day-to-day operation, that kind of inhibiting factor, right? Prohibiting maybe them basically as a barrier, right? So to basically adopt EPD or as a whole, right? So like a sustainable, any other sustainability solution,
Mhm.
right? So but EPD perhaps is more relevant to
Mhm.
this conversation. Yeah, just curious, right? So what are the what kind of gaps already exist on the
Yeah.
tech?
So I'm going to start out with a hot take, um, which is um, it's not always. So this really varies depending on the size of
Yeah,
operations, right?
absolutely.
If you are managing 1 to 3 to 5 plants, the reality is you can do that with almost perfect efficiency,
Yeah,
just based on some GMs with great
yeah,
experience. And what one of our philosophies of Pathways is, we use AI because it allows us to, for example, ingest data that isn't neatly kept, right? So it allows us to ingest PDFs,
yeah,
which is almost like using modern technology to not annoy you in your day-to-day operations. Most of our customers we chat with on the phone. Why? Because they are working their sites, and phone is the fastest way, right? They don't jump on a Zoom or a Google Meet call,
yeah,
or a Teams call, right? That's just like adding additional friction. So I think there's something here about a philosophy of how do we use really modern tech to meet producers where they are without them having to become IT
yeah,
experts.
absolutely. Yeah,
And that's been a really kind of important philosophy of ours. That said, we all know that as soon as you start looking at bigger operations, you might have a fleet you need to manage. I mean, a lot of the work you're doing on smart mix, right? Mix optimization is incredibly complex. It's one of the best uses of AI, and in some
definitely.
ways, I think of
Yeah.
Pathways as something that really neatly integrates with an advanced data stack.
Mhm.
But our data collection philosophy is that might be someone who texts us the key piece of information, and we have the text integrated into our platform, so it just pulls from there,
Yeah.
right? High and low tech at the same
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. Yeah, no, no, that's very interesting observation, right? So we have similar case, right, in maybe a smart mix
Mhm.
test data, right? Break test data, they call it break test data, right? So they are receiving that in a very kind of regular basis, right, from test lab, contractor even, right? So providing the concrete test result. But what we've seen, learned that yeah, even they don't have time, or basically there's no easy way for them to translate or transfer those PDF data into the basically system, so that the system, and that's the most important part of our basic system, to right, to see the test data, to do the optimization based on the performance, right? And what we did in order to make their job easier, right, we asked them just auto forward, right, any email, right, put the rules, any email that has a test data attachment, forward, and we will basically do the kind of AI based OCR kind of, and just transfer them, seamlessly to the system, right? Just another example you mentioned. We try to offer solution, but at the same time, we don't expect with the expectation that the industry still is behind, right, in terms of the tech adoption or tech savviness, all those things. And we tried basically at the same time using technology to bridge that gap, to make it easier, right, so that they can communicate, okay, with email, even with the system, just forward the email, right, or auto forward the email, and we will take care of the rest, right, so that you don't need to basically do the manual entry, or just another example that.
I love that. No, I love that because I'm also like, I mean, both you and Emporia go into worlds where tech is being kept as the holy grail.
Yeah,
I'm like, we live in a material world.
yeah,
Most of this is about moving
moving in
one
reality.
material from one place to another
Yeah,
place, whether it be the inputs that are procured, how you manage your inventory, right? These are like real things,
yeah,
right? And then you can use technology to make that easier. But I think too
yeah,
often it's being made too elitist.
yeah.
Whereas in our experience, uh, um, as long as you have the information, we can take it in whichever way, and
Exactly.
technology should be there to make life easier,
Easier,
not
yeah,
life harder.
the harder, exactly. No, that's super important. No, that's a good actually point you raise here. Yeah, that was very perhaps insightful. So yeah,
Mm.
and also perhaps for our people who are listening, right? So that's kind of a good way of saying that how we are thinking, right? Geotech and Pathway both to basically make their life easier, not necessarily the other way around, right? That's
Okay.
perhaps one of the key messages from this conversation. Okay, maybe for the sake of time, I'll ask you maybe one or two more questions, if I may, and then you can perhaps, yeah, open it for any other comments you may have or question. Yeah, just maybe. I think we talk about the barriers to adoption a little bit. That right? Maybe just a little bit since we already started. Right, is a good segue. Let's talk about the culture, right? So, how do you see the culture of the customer, right? Internal culture, organization culture, right? I mean, the way they run the business, as you mentioned, each of them is different. Depends on the small, medium, or big sizes, right? They have different kind of internal culture or internal buy-in event, right? And also different stakeholders, right? In within the organization, from batch person, dispatch, executive leadership, QC team, right? GM, right? So there are lots of stakeholders. They have different kind of responsibility, and they're wearing different hats. How do you see how important basically is the culture of the team, right, itself, right, the
Mm.
overall culture of that organization when it comes to pushing sustainable solution or innovation, right? So yeah, do you see any relationship, right, so with that, with the
Mm.
sustainability? I know that is fragmented, is a market, geographical, kind of region by region, or even within the city to city. There is a trend, right, based on basically regulation or expectation of the
Mm.
market and construction as a whole. The construction trade is very local, right? Even North America, from state to state, from city to city, you see the different trade even, right? So one city using more concrete, the other one maybe more steel structure, right? Even to that extent. But within that kind of
Yeah.
this like a scatter or fragmentation that we see, is this still there is a one-to-one relationship with the culture of the organization within that concept to the adoption of sustainability, or is you see that is more driven by policies or regional things than basically the culture of the organization? I don't know whether I clarified that right.
No, you did.
Yeah,
You did, and I get I get totally what you're talking about here, and I'm sure you have it when you talk about smart mix
yeah,
and using new technologies, which is like how willing are people to learn new things, to use new things, and
yeah,
I mean, I think culture drives everything,
yeah.
right? That's what we find across our customer base, across our own team.
Okay,
Um,
interesting. Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
I think the most important cultural factor we're finding that can really drive this is the amount of such a buzzword, but like empowerment,
Hmm.
right? We don't have limits to the number of users who can be on our platform. And in organizations where the philosophy is, hey, everyone should be able to get access to these things,
Hmm.
you might get someone who you didn't expect who's suddenly playing in our scenario planner
Hmm.
and finding out that there is a different cement that actually also comes in that has a much lower emission footprint. It might
Hmm.
not be the person you expected it to do it.
That's true. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like, if you don't allow people to get that data, to get their hands on it,
Hmm.
it's very hard for them to do it in the
Scalable.
first.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very interesting actually. Yeah, that was our observation. Definitely right. So the adoption of technology at least has a direct relationship, right? It's very direct actually with the culture of the organization, but I was not that much. It was not visible to me that even sustainability, because I was thinking more driven by
Innovation.
like in New York, for example, right, compared to Texas, right, driven by local regulation, policy, how much provincial, like a state government, or like they're pushing. But interesting is still the culture is number one, right? So okay, that's very interesting point.
Is that also what you're finding with your
Yeah,
customer
yeah,
base?
absolutely. For us, it's the direct one, right? So it doesn't matter where they're located. Yeah, some company innovators, right, there are more culture of adoption of new, even try like experimental risk taker kind of,
Mhm.
and enable people to try things, fail, and there are not much kind of strict policy, right? So or very kind of uh, strict on the budget, right? To give a little bit, yeah, innovation. People try new thing, and also part of their professional development, right? So culture that let people try a new technology at least for a year, right, or two, and that way they believe that they can basically evolve faster, right? So this is a kind of culture we see that they're more open to adoption, but there are other cultures that they want to wait to see maybe 50% of the market using that is 100% guaranteed ROI yeah, is guaranteed, is a direct line and safe, then and then the jump quite often, lag it. But yeah, definitely for us, finding there like a few people that we have the right culture at least, or advocate, that make it significantly different, right? So if those people don't exist in the even in organization that with open mind, they want to explore, or and also understanding that the technology is not perfect, right? They need to be a little bit patient, right? So to make it to show them the ROI or benefit, that those type of kind of customer are more kind of ahead of the curve, right, in terms of adoption. Yeah, yeah. Okay, but interesting, APD, sustainability. I didn't expect that this is important, that much important, right? I thought maybe it's a second, third one, but that seems that is one of the important
Yeah.
factors. Awesome. So maybe last question, right? So yeah, just how what does success look like, right? So in your opinion, right, in 5 years, right, especially from EPD point of view, right? So yeah, what would be perhaps things that you're gonna say that wow, in 5 years, such a good basically progress, right? As in this as a whole, right? Industry got to maybe 90% of the mixes has EPD, or EPDs in the real time, right? Whatever it is, right? So in the EPD world, right? Maybe you just limit it, make it a
Yeah.
little bit easier. What would be your basically ideal world in 5 years, right? So yeah, you expect, or you wish to that
Yeah.
industry go.
And and to be fair, I think my wish on this is also how I what I think is most likely.
Okay, cool.
So I'm originally from Denmark, and Lego, so which means I love Lego analogies, right?
Yeah,
And I like to say buildings and infrastructure, it's just like Lego.
yeah,
It's just the sum of the bricks,
yeah,
and uh, and the only way we can decarbonize our heavy industry, our built world, is brick by brick. So this is not just concrete, this is all
yeah, yeah,
materials. Right. Whether you be making a sink for the bathroom, paint for the wall, the steel beams, or the concrete. Um, and I absolutely think that in 5 years, EPDs is the same as having your safety sheet and your delivery note. This is just the core basic information about a product. And what will that really look like? Well, that'll be enabled by solutions like, frankly, what we're building at Pathways, but also other players who are making it much easier to create this. Because if it's as painful as it is for most concrete producers today, then of course no one is going to get it.
okay. That's,
Whereas if
that's
it's
fair.
integrated into your existing data
Yeah,
system and you don't have to do anything but push one button, then it's very easy.
yeah,
And I think maybe, I mean, one thought I would want to give to any producer listening to this is it doesn't have to be hard, right?
yeah.
Like, we really stand by the promise of this takes an hour of your time,
Cool.
and then you are set up.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means we say we are checking in with you 15 minutes every day this week. And we are making you open your data system and there's just export from it. But then it's done, and
Absolutely.
then it's all built in, right? Because there's nothing worse than a process that drags out.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the kind of key pieces that are going to enable what I think is going to be an enormous shift in the next 5 years.
Awesome. Yeah, no, very realistic actually. Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for you didn't make it yeah, imaginary, right? So yeah, just the realistic, right? So yeah, expectation, and I think is achievable, right? So yeah, it's achievable. It's just enablement piece. If you enable the industry to basically do it much easier, faster, at lowest cost in a way, because yeah, if a human is less involved and everything is available in the same place, yeah, that would be perhaps very realistic expectation or goal to have in 5 years. Absolutely. Okay, so yeah, with that, just want to make sure maybe we have 1 minute to wrap up. Do you have any other comments or thoughts or idea to share, or any question even for me, right? So anything, just yeah, before we wrap up, yeah, from my
Yeah.
point of view, it's been a very productive conversation, and also yeah, I really learn, and I hope our people who are listening to this podcast, benefit from this insight sharing from your side. Absolutely. But anything that you feel that missing or you're going to add, yeah, please.
So I guess one fact that I just recently learned, and which I guess I think was really interesting, was that NRMCA has verified more EPDs in May this year than they did all of 2024.
Wow, in one
Right.
month.
So
It's a new.
in 1 month.
Wow.
So when we talk about, things are changing or kind of we're seeing movement, what all we are seeing is kind of expansion and growth. And
So,
the risk here for producers who don't have this information available is that they end up lagging behind. And that's probably kind of what one of the places where we where we pay attention right now, is to make sure everyone gets on board or on this wave and are able to use the information. And then I think, I mean, I love the work you guys do on smart mix and integrating all this, because it is complex, right? And it takes, I like to say, we're not in the business of inventing the silver bullet, right? That's the people who are doing kind of chemical innovations on how to reduce clinker usage, right?
yep, yep.
We are in the slivers of silver, right? Curious, it's cutting out small slivers of silver, and so are we at
Yeah.
Pathways. But together, all those small slivers of silver can become the bullet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good analogy actually you used to explain, what we are doing at Geotech and Aspe. Yeah, great insight, and also thanks for sharing that the stats from NRMC. I didn't know that was that's been very interesting. It's very, and also promising.
Yeah,
It's an acceleration hockey stick pass CPD, and perhaps that's a great opportunity for your organization and other organization, focusing on that, right? So yeah, to basically take advantage of this adoption curve, right? So which is great. Awesome.
yeah.
So yeah, with that, I just want to thank you for your time today. It was a great conversation, and hopefully there will be another occasion we will basically have a similar conversation on this topic or another one, right? So for me, it's been a great pleasure actually speaking to you today.
For always a pleasure, and really appreciate it. And we'll speak soon.
Likewise, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Cheers.
Bye bye.